Please. Okay, I think. Oh dear, wait a minute. Stop share screen. Okay, while I'm trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. Just one moment. Oh dear, it's the next slide up. Wait a minute. Oh, rats. One moment, just calm down, Cheryl. Well, we're gonna have two things that are gonna go on today. Three things, actually. We're going to start and end this section, which is our program for this month, with a video. We're going to have our illustrious speaker, and I'm going to introduce her in just one moment. And she's going to have a dialogue with Ogechi and with me, maybe. And there will be a question and answer part. And then we will end with a little bit of hope of something that has happened regarding the topic of today. So just one moment, please. There she is. Okay. Just one moment. And we are going to share the screen, and here she is. So two things are going to happen right now. And this is one of them. Okay. Today's speaker is the dynamic Miss Mikayla Arciaga. And she is an educator, a coach. She's an advocate for children and public education. After she graduated from South Florida University, she began working as a high school math teacher and a swim coach. Boy, those two things are related, huh? She's also worked closely with students, parents, teachers, and community leaders to establish a culture of inclusion and support, and to ensure that students find success both in and out of the classroom. Ms. Arciaga's career experience includes working as a policy and research analyst with the Urban League of Greater Atlanta. In the 2021 election cycle, Ms. Arciaga ran for election to the Atlanta Public Schools School Board to represent District 4 in Georgia. In the nonpartisan race, she received 30.2 votes, 0.2% of the vote, not quite enough to defeat Jennifer McDonald, but I bet you she put Jennifer McDonald on notice. And currently, Ms. Arciaga, in her capacity that she comes to us today in, is the Education and Policy Fellow with Intercultural Development Research Association, which is IDRA, and she's actively engaged in leading the charge against classroom censorship. Ms. Arciaga will discuss the ramifications of SB 375, 377, HB 888, and 1048, Senate Bills 226 and 1217. And we probably have some of those that we can show briefly on this screen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen before she comes on because I want to show something else to you. We're going to look at a 3-minute clip from CNN. That's frightening me because now I'm not seeing it. Just one second. I know I'm going to see it. There it is. Okay. Pennsylvania. Just one moment. Okay, here it is. Okay. And it's a 3-minute clip from Pennsylvania. And I want you to hear what's going on in the world with CRT. Here we go.
If you can just adjust the volume there. Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. Yeah.
Equality and loving each other.
These teenagers in York, Pennsylvania are standing up to the latest example of controversy surrounding history and race that is affecting a growing number of America's public schools.
The school board cannot just silence our voices.
Last fall, the all-white school board of the Central York School District unanimously banned a list of educational resources.
That resource list, which has a lot of bad ideas and some books that I would definitely not want in our district.
And I do not feel it's balanced, and I think it's divisive.
That list includes a children's book about Rosa Parks, Malala Yousafzai's autobiography, CNN's Sesame Street Town Hall on racism,
Racism? What's that?
and much, much more.
This is Hidden Figures. I don't, the movie was,
Like from the movie.
yeah.
This is the kids' version of the book from the movie.
Yeah.
It's frustrating for the students.
This is a board that, after hearing their students' concerns about diversity in the district, hearing my struggles with race, being an Indian American and consistently feeling like I didn't belong, after all those conversations for weeks on end, they still pursued this book ban.
I want to learn genuine history. I don't want to learn a whitewashed version. I want to hear all of it. I don't want everyone to be worried about how we feel, because no one was worried about how BIPOC members of the community felt.
The ban caused school librarians to pull books from shelves and is creating real fear among educators.
I have to now, with this resource ban, think twice about whether or not I should or could use a James Baldwin quote as an opening for my class.
There are teachers looking over their shoulders, wondering if someone's going to be at their door, darkening their door, that you said something or you mentioned something or you used something that you were not supposed to.
The fact that all the banned materials are by or about people of color is just a coincidence, according to the school board president. Concerns were based on the content of the resources, not the author or topic, she said in a statement. She and the rest of the school board refused to speak on camera. She says it's not a ban. The materials are frozen while the board vets them, but the process is still ongoing after nearly a year. That suits some parents in this 82% white district just fine.
I don't want my daughter growing up feeling guilty because she's white.
That sentiment is spreading. At least 27 states have passed or are considering policies strictly defining what students are allowed to learn about race. One expert says the York ban is something new.
Yeah, this seems pretty egregious. I mean, I can see how certain trainings or workshops that some parents take exception to seem really outside of what a history class can be expected to do. But the kind of texts that are being banned here make me feel that there is now just sort of an allergy to anything that mentions race or racism.
This is about more than a book or a movie or even a curriculum, some veteran teachers say. In York, they worry it's a war on their profession.
I am not an enemy of the state.
That's right.
I am here to take care of your babies when they walk into my classroom. And there are some I'm looking up at, but they're still babies.
This is CNN Plus.
There are 5 things you need to know.
That's a lot of excitement.
Our most upvoted questions. Never experienced anything like this.
And that was
Because it has been such a slog for the Russians on the ground, one of the things you watch is what are they trying?
okay. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. I'm so sorry. Did I stop sharing my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. And ladies, and I would like to turn you over to our most wonderful and auspicious member, Miss Ogechi Opara, who will be starting and conducting the interview with our wonderful guest speaker, Miss Mikayla Arciaga. Please, Ogechi.
Okay, thank you so much, Cheryl, for that context. This is nationwide. So while it's, we're hearing York, this is so certainly something that is happening in Georgia as well. And I'm so glad to have Mikayla here, who I consider a friend. I think one of the first experiences we got to have together was as like budget nerds over a budget in the school district where I work, and really looking at those line items and just know that your prowess as a researcher and just an advocate for what is right is just so inspiring to me. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. And I know that you're going to share some of the context around this, but I'd love for you to just kind of talk about your reactions to this, because you're on the ground, you're doing this grassroots work, just bringing people together around this classroom censorship. And so if you can just talk about your response to what's happening now and what you're doing as a result, that would be fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm so thrilled to be here. I really appreciate you all inviting me into this space. So for context, I work for an organization called IDRA. They were originally based in Texas, which is where we saw kind of that first wave of censorship bills that were coming through the schools. So Texas had several bills that were actually more specific than what we're seeing now go through their legislature last session. And so my organization had some direct experiencing organizing students and teachers and families to work against these bills. And my now supervisor wanted to bring that same experience and to inform what we knew was going to start happening in Georgia, since we know that Texas and Georgia and Florida all kind of try to outdo one another. So we knew we wanted to start bringing people together soon and early, and we started a group called the Georgia Coalition Against Classroom Censorship. And that, I apologize, I have a coworker if you hear him in the background. So we brought this group together, and the main thing, and what really I loved about IDRA is that they don't try to hijack the work that folks are already doing on the ground, but they did want to bring people together, because we realized how many of our folks are working in silos. And so that was the goal of this coalition. We are now over 100 members. We have over 10 different organizations represented. And so we try to provide both an immediate response sort of action. I am so sorry. Immediate reaction, as well as a long-term planning and action items for people who don't have time to be in the Capitol every day. Our goal is to but whose voices need to be heard the most. So we have really tried to prioritize student voice in this entire conversation, as well as parent voice and teacher voice, just because, and I am a little biased here, but I tend to think that these policies are made without actually talking to teachers. And teachers are the ones best positioned to fix these concerns that parents have. So that is the work that we're doing right now. So we bring this coalition together every week, and we try to position people who are best suited to voice their opposition and concern about these bills, because they are most likely to be impacted by them.
Thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing at the Capitol and the kinds of public comment and speaking out that's been happening, and what's been most striking to you in that experience?
So it's important to understand where these bills come from. So these bills, so there's two sources. The first source is the executive order that was made, and I believe 2018, from the then president, who wanted to prevent the teaching of divisive concepts in any government institution. And divisive concepts, quote unquote, are any concept that has to do with equity or systemic racism, or and now they've expanded that to become diversity, inclusion, anything that could possibly hint that the United States is not in fact fundamentally racist, is considered a divisive concept. And there are also concepts in that way regarding sexism and gender discrimination as well. So that is that is what kind of started it. But these bills specifically were written by ALEC. And so that is why they all kind of look the same in every single state. So we're seeing them in Georgia, we're seeing them in Florida, we're seeing them in Tennessee, we're seeing them everywhere. And so that is important to recognize, because it also reflects the public comment that we're seeing. We are seeing the same voices. We are seeing a lot of we are seeing a lot of quote unquote parent organizers who are part of groups called like No Left Turn or traditionally more conservative, the Baptist, oh gosh, what's his actual, like there's pretty consistently testimony from like the Baptist convention, frontline policy center is another conservative think tank that also is working to support these censorship bills. So that is what we're hearing a lot of. We have worked to try and position parents and students to come and testify and for one of these bills, and that has become increasingly more difficult because of some of the lack of transparency and lack of consistency with the way that we are seeing committees being run. For example, there was a bill, there is a bill, it is still active, Senate Bill 377. When it was going through the Senate, we were told there would be a hearing on a Monday. We rallied our entire coalition. We had almost 40 people there to speak, and then they did not take public comment on the bill. So we had people who had taken off work, who had left school, who had pulled their kids out of school to come and talk and speak against these bills, whose voices were not able to be heard. And they allowed people to sign up for public comment and then did not actually allow for public comment. And that happened not once, but twice for that bill. And then they finally allowed public comment to happen, but then it got broken up over 3 days because of how many people wanted to speak. And so when that kind of thing happens, everyone knows that if you are working at all, or you are working or you are a student, you don't always have the flexibility to respond to that inconsistency with committee hearings. And typically you need a little bit more heads up. So the other part of that is the committees are not putting out their agendas. We would get one of the days, and it wasn't a censorship bill, but the Senate committee and the House committee has done this as well. But the Senate committee put out that there would be a meeting. They said on Thursday there'd be a meeting on Monday and didn't release the agenda until Sunday night, or I guess Monday morning at 3:45 a.m. So even the senators didn't know what bills they were going to be reviewing in that committee. So it's things like that that are making organizing and advocacy really difficult, especially to put forth like authentic voice that needs to be heard. I mean, I can testify because I'm there, but what they really need to hear from are teachers and kids and parents, and we have been able to bring parents in, we have been able to get students in front of them, but again, it's not the same, it's not the full force of what we would like to put in front of them, and what they need to hear, because a lot of the voices also that they are hearing in support of these bills are white, evangelical conservative groups, and so that has been the lack of diversity is kind of exactly who these bills would serve.
Can you, I really like that you're talking about who is sort of representing the like pro censorship group. What are the messages that they're sending? I want to start with that because I also want to ask, what are the messages that counter that what I'd call misinformation about critical race theory, et cetera?
Okay, so what we're here, so the whole point of these bills, and specifically like the divisive concept bills, and there's a couple different types of censorship bills happening right now, but the divisive concept bills specifically, what they do is they created a list of topics that they have labeled as divisive. And in all honesty, not all of the concepts are necessarily bad things. So like some of them, it's like, it's divisive to tell a child that they should feel bad or feel guilt because of their race, or they should feel discomfort or anguish because of their race, or they should feel responsible for lack of a better phrase, systemic racism because of their race. And so what we're hearing from these folks is like, oh, my kid felt bad, or there was a teacher who used a lesson and told the white kids they should all feel bad about racism, and it was their fault that systemic racism exists. And the hard part about these bills is anyone can come up and tell an anecdote, right? I mean, anybody can come and tell an anecdote. There's no verification of the validity of this. There's no system that to check and say, oh, well, this is what actually happened, or this didn't happen at all. There's nothing for that. We've even had some of these folks come forward for these bills that didn't even know what literally said, we don't know. I can't find the script for this hearing right now. And then read somebody else's story, which is typically not allowed. Because if you're telling somebody else's story, how do we know that that's actually true, right? I mean, in real world, we would love that to be true, but again, it feels like we're playing by different sets of rules. So we're hearing a lot of this, no child should feel guilty for something that happened 400 years ago. Some of the biggest problems is that the divisive concepts, one of them is like the United States and the state of Georgia is a fundamentally racist place. That's been labeled a divisive concept. And so the hard part of that is to respond to that is whether or not we actually agree if the United States is fundamentally racist. And with the growing movement and incorporation of social emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools, we are hopefully helping students to learn about the history of our country in a way that is true and honest. And we're talking about completely different things, because we have people that are testifying on feelings, and then we have people that are testifying on, well, this is a curriculum that has worked for my students, and we have actual evidence that shows that students who learn about systemic racism and their identity as part of a community do better in our schools. So I go to the Capitol probably 2 or 3 times a week. I meet with some of our representatives, and we've said, and even they have said that these bills are not necessarily for 99% of teachers, but it's to cover the 1% that are not doing what they're supposed to do. And some of us might disagree on whether or not we should be legislating for that 1%, or if we need to do a better job of writing this language. And so that is kind of what we're seeing. So the messaging that it's hard to say what is effective, because we have not been able to stop almost any of these bills. And part of that is that there is a majority party, and they know how to use their majority to their advantage. So even with pushback, even within their party, when amendments are put forth to kind of clarify language or make these bills a little bit better, they've been resistant to that. We have seen these bills change. They have gotten better, if not still good. They are still bad bills, but they have gotten somewhat better. But it's hard to say what is really effective, apart from folks who live in their districts calling their representatives who are on these committees, which is a pretty limited number of folks most of the time.
So, so you're talking about the change in these bills and what has happened. And one thing that was noted is that instead of banning critical race theory at the college level of higher education, which, to think that would be even a question, instead of banning that in higher education, that is now acceptable. It's acceptable to teach that in higher education, but it's not acceptable to teach in grade school, in the high school, et cetera. And go ahead.
Sorry. Well, and problematically, so House bill, so there's 2, and what we're seeing also is these 2 partner bills that are moving through both houses that they are either going to be reconciled at the end, or one is going to be put forth as the final censorship bill. So House Bill 1084, who is sponsored by Will Wade, has provisions specifically for state institutions and for the Georgia Professional Standards Commission, which is the governing body that provides for teacher certifications. So so the Georgia PSC cannot require any training or teacher development that teaches divisive concepts. Quote unquote. So while they're and Senate Bill 377, which is the twin bill in the Senate, had originally provisions specifically for higher education. Those have since been removed. But they're showing us what they want to do. They are showing us what the ultimate goal is, which is the censorship from K to 20 and beyond. So has not moved since, and I do think that there is some work being done behind the scenes by some of the bigger educational bodies. But yeah, that is the ramifications will carry forward, I think.
So there's a question in the chat, and I think it's definitely a good time to kind of incorporate some of these. One is about strategies that have been successful, and you sort of touched on that in Georgia because we haven't seen the success yet, but there has been some success in Texas. And I was wondering if you could touch on what worked there and maybe what we can pull from there as we come to a close.
So, and I will share the link to this because it's just phenomenal to watch. But what really worked in Texas is we put K-12 kids in front of the General Assembly. We put them in front of these legislators, and we worked with their families to provide travel and provide. We helped them develop testimony, and what that looks like is they just come and they meet with us and they say we want to say these few things, or they'll draft it in preparation, and we'll come and help them work and tweak their language down to the typically 2-minute limit. That's what we think worked the best, because, and I will tell you, these legislators never look as uncomfortable as they do when there are kids testifying in front of them about these bills. And so that's what the ultimate goal is to put more kids in opposition to share their concerns and their opposition to these bills. That's the best. And I think the second best is to parents, because all of this is kind of rooted in this move to give parents more access and more quote unquote transparency to their kids' education, which is not inherently a bad thing. And I guarantee in this space that y'all know that there's a lot of parents who are excluded from the conversations about what happens to their kids and for their kids. And that is something that we want to promote, but at the same time, these bills would allow a singular parent to influence what is happening in a classroom of multiple kids, not just their one child, but all of the kids in a classroom or in a school. And that is where we find these bills to be most harmful. So the other complaint that we get, and let me say why we want parents and teachers, because something that has started recently is that they give this pushback that all they hear from is paid lobbyists, which is true to a degree. Like I am technically a registered lobbyist, even though I was in the classroom just over a year ago. And the reason, but what they don't seem to grasp is that the reason why they're only hearing from lobbyists is because they've made it so much harder for anybody who isn't paid to be there every day to get in front of them. So that is, what we really need is our local constituents and actual voters, quote unquote, to talk to their legislators and say that they do not want them supporting these bills. That seems to be the only thing that kind of works, is threatening their election, and thankfully it is an election year, so some of that does seem to work.
So you mentioned being a teacher and being in the classroom, and a great one, and I'm still in the classroom. This is just on teachers and how to support educators in this moment. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. First of all, I think that if you ask any teacher who has had a conversation about diversity or social emotional learning or equity or even systemic racism explicitly in their classroom, I would say that the vast majority of them would say that that is not a problem that is harming their kids. I think that the way that we best support teachers is by making sure that we're fully funding our quality education formula, which they did this year, but that formula has not been modified since it was passed in 1985. So we don't actually know if that's, well, actually we do know that it's not providing everything that our teachers need. I think that we need to make sure that we're funding specifically for low-income kids, and making sure that we are doing that in a way that actually reaches the kids who need it most. And then I also think that we need to make sure that we are protecting teachers who are acting in good faith to provide the best possible education for their kids. What a lot of these bills do is puts teachers further at the mercy of administrators and administration, and then also just general bureaucracy. And I think that some of the time that is what interferes the most with teachers being able to do what they need to do. And when I don't know any teacher who doesn't want their parents involved in the classroom. But I also don't know any teacher who doesn't want their kids to see themselves in the curriculum that they're teaching. And so I think that when this happens, it is going to fundamentally harm our brown and black kids, because I don't know of any of my kids who weren't already aware of systemic racism in the United States and who don't already feel some degree of discomfort or anguish when they think about how frustrating it is to be a person of color in the United States. So I think that these bills are going to create a lot more work for teachers who are already stretched much too thin, without providing any additional support for the actual execution of these things. This is going to put a lot of burden as well on administrators, and overburdened administrators don't support their teachers as well. They just can't. Mm-hmm. So I think that I would want it. What the other part I would want is to make sure that teachers know. I think that, I don't know. I don't want to say like teach your heart anyway, but I also think we know long term that it's best for our kids, and our kids are going to be voting eventually. So part of me is inclined to do that, but I also recognize that I'm saying that from the safety of not being a teacher anymore. So it's hard to say to a teacher, like, put yourself at risk of this higher levels of scrutiny, and to do what's best for our kids. But and I think we know that there's going to be, that's what we're worried about, right? Like, that is going to cause a lot of teachers to have to make a choice between their livelihood and what they know their kids need, and that's an impossible place to be in for a teacher.
Yeah, and actually, it's just so interesting. I'm seeing another question in the chat to this question about, we do have a teacher shortage already, and pandemic aside, these bills have the ability to really affect people's choices, teachers' choices to actually go into the classroom. And so the question here is, do you think we'll lose more teachers if these bills pass?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and I say that from my own perspective, but I mean, that we are not paid enough for the amount of I mean, I don't know. I don't know that this is, so here's my problem with some of these bills. The divisive concept bills are relatively new, but the processes that they are referring to are not new. The only thing that they do differently than you would see in any other school is that, and this is what happens, is that when a parent has a complaint, if they don't go immediately to the teacher and they do go to the principal, almost always the principal redirects them back down to the teacher anyway. These bills are creating this pathway that would allow parents to bypass teachers, which is just fundamentally not good for kids. And it creates this antagonistic relationship between parents and teachers who in every way should be partners. And so you're putting teachers in this position where they're having to worry at every moment. And we heard it in that interview where that teacher is having to second guess whether or not to use a quote in his classroom that many of his kids might identify with. And that, I think, I just think that teachers are already stretched too thin. We are seeing enormous increases in behavioral discipline rates, which I have all kinds of feelings about. But what that means is that's also coming back on teachers, right? Having to increase discipline, having to increase, and if discipline is increasing, it means behaviors in the classrooms are increasing. And that's what I'm hearing anecdotally from my friends and what we're hearing across the state. There was apparently a meeting yesterday or 2 days ago with the governor about the increased rate of behavioral problems that we're seeing in classes. I just don't think that creating more bureaucratic hurdles that bypass the teachers is going to incentivize more teachers to want to do this job.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge who we have in this space. We have some really dynamic women. Some may not, most don't have kids in the school system right now, but they have had children. They are, they're in this county, in this community, and they're, in some ways, as we're listening to this, what can we do? What's the action item that we can kind of take away to engage with this issue and related issues to make sure that this isn't happening in the future?
So I think there's a couple of things. I genuinely don't think it can be undervalued that talking to your representatives does impact things. And I don't know who covers y'all specifically. I don't.
Valencia C. We have Deborah Bazemore. We have.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, and Bazemore does an excellent job. So I mean, and a lot of the time, those of us that are having these conversations don't, especially in the metro area, don't have the representatives that are the ones to worry about. But I do think it's important that we are reaching out to the committee members, making sure that it's clear, like, these are our concerns. This is what we are, what we don't want to see. And part of what they are saying in response to folks that are opposing these bills is, oh, well, they can teach it. They can teach about systemic racism. They just can't make kids feel bad or responsible for it. And for anybody who has ever worked with children or had children, you all know that you can say one thing to a kid and they can take a completely tangential feeling or response back from that, no matter what, and it happens always. So I think we emphasize that this is going, and what I will say is anyone you talk to about this, emphasize the impact on kids. Unfortunately, some of the messaging research that we're seeing has basically said that people don't really care about the impact on teachers. They care more about the impact on our kids, which just pains me to say, because I think if you hurt teachers, you're going to hurt kids in the long term. But I think the other part is even if you have connections in like your education system. So anybody that's a member of the School Board Association. We have only heard from one school board member in the entire state in these hearings. We had a Metro Atlanta school board member come and speak about these bills and the impact of them. And I just think that the more folks that we can put in front of them, the better. I don't think that we can go quietly into this, right? I don't know that we can necessarily stop them, but I think that the one thing we should not do is allow them to do this quietly and in the dark, which despite their best efforts. And then I also would just say, like, support your schools. If you can substitute, or if you know a teacher and they need help them out, send them groceries. And also, I would talk to people about this, right? I think that part of what is happening is there is a lot of misinformation being put out, and there's a lot of concern about what these bills do and don't do, but also why we need them. And so I think that the more anecdotes that we can tell people about, like, why it's important for kids to see themselves in their curriculum, why it's important for kids to have real and honest conversations about the history of our country, is how we kind of combat and support our teachers. And then just telling teachers that they're doing a good job, because I don't know that they get told that a lot. Oh gosh.
Wow. Yeah, so that's really great. Thank you. You're talking about really calling our representatives, even though, especially, and we've talked about this in a previous meeting, those who are not already supporters of this, those who are, not our Democratic representatives, to make sure that our voices are heard. And we do have those in Fayette County, showing up in front of our legislators, supporting our local schools, and sharing the message about why this matters. So thank you for sharing that. We do have some questions from the chat that I definitely want to get to, and I guess we can work our way backwards, so we won't forget anybody. Delma Harris, you'd like to thank you for raising your hand. A statement regarding banned books.
Yes, good afternoon. I am a former media specialist, recently retired a little over a year ago, from Clayton County School Systems. Now, what we have to realize that there's a separation when you're talking about banning books. Teachers, more or less, are responsible for the reviews of classroom books. As a media specialist, such as the books that you showed on the screen, like Who's Rosa Parks, and there was a whole series of those books, Who's Martin Luther King, whatever. Those books are under the direction of the purchases from the media specialist. So there is a separation of the type of banned books that you were speaking of. Teachers didn't have anything to do with those types of books. It was the media specialist. And I, for one, ordered all of those. Just about every book that you showed, I have purchased those books for my media center. I have over 10,000 books that were purchased, and I primarily purchased books that were written by African-American authors, based on the fact that not many of these authors' books were being purchased. I read the books, I reviewed them, and if they were appropriate for elementary schools, I purchased them. And there was certainly nothing wrong with Who's Rosa Parks, Who's Martin Luther King. That was just a series of little easy nonfiction books for the younger kids, very appropriate. So there was nothing inappropriate about that. And so when it comes to banning books, that will fall under the media specialists, not teachers. So maybe you all should have some media specialists or librarians on your committee, because we're the ones who read and review these books, not teachers.
So there is actually a bill that specifically applies to school libraries as well.
Right.
And that one, so House Bill 1084 and Senate Bill 377 have to do with classroom instructional materials. And I appreciate you making that distinction, because those two bills are what will impact our classroom teachers. Senate Bill 226, which you may have heard of last year at the first half of the biennium, was the one that wanted to jail librarians and media specialists for providing quote unquote harmful materials to students. And that bill, and so one of my favorite people who I work with, I was actually at the Capitol with on Thursday, asking them not to move this bill forward with, is a current librarian in Fulton County Schools. Senate Bill 226 is actually probably the most immediate and emergent bill that we are dealing with, because it has passed both houses and it has passed out of committee. It is in the House currently, and it has been assigned to the House Rules calendar, or House consideration calendar. So they heard they heard it on Friday, and it was not put on the calendar. And so we got a day or two of reprieve. The problem with that bill too is that originally it created legal penalties for librarians, and that was taken out. But because of those legal elements to it, they have assigned that bill to the judiciary committees and judiciary non-civil. So it was never heard by the education committee. And so the only testimony that was given on those bills was those who knew that it was being heard in the judiciary committee and not the education committee. So that bill was passed out of committee, not unanimously. It received a lot of opposition, but is probably one of the most at risk of being put into law right now, because it has passed out of both committees. It was not put on the calendar. We specifically asked Jan Jones, who is the House Speaker Pro Tem, not to put it on the calendar, but she is very concerned with parent rights right now, and making sure that parents have access. And so I don't know if that means that bill's not going to be heard or if it's been stopped, but it is probably one of our most emerging concerns as far as censoring our schools.
Right, okay, because that was my next statement about that bill that I heard about last year,
So there's a question in here about pushback for the inclusion of social-emotional learning, and what is that about? Why is there pushback?
So first, it's important to recognize social emotional curriculum focuses on the three levels of a kid's identity, right? There's that understanding of their selves, their understanding of their relationships within their immediate social circles, and then their understanding of themselves in their place in the community and society, right? And when we start unpacking kids' understanding of their place in their society and in their communities, part of that is understanding the systems that operate around them and understanding why the systems that they see in the real world, how those systems have come to pass. So when we're trying to teach kids how to navigate, so there's a lot of reasons why these groups don't like SEL. Mainly it's because they think that it's teaching kids to be aggressive towards one another, or to blame one another for the failures of society, which any teacher will tell you is not at all what we try to do. And rarely, I don't think I've ever heard of that being the result. But SEL has become a really easy target because it does focus on diversity. It focuses on equity. It focuses on teaching kids to empathize with peers who do not look like them. And that fundamentally, I think, undermines the systems of, for lack of a better phrase, white supremacy that has enabled historic power structures, right? It teaches kids how to see themselves in society, how to see their community, how to recognize systems that are working against them, and how to equip themselves to change them, right? Both internally and externally. So that, and I don't know that any teachers are explicitly saying it that way, but I think that's the outcome, right? Kids that are more emotionally aware, emotionally empowered, are able to recognize systems that harm them and are more empowered and motivated to change them. And so I think that's where a lot of that is truly rooted in. They say that it creates unnecessary, or that's something that parents should be responsible for, or it's encroaching on parents' rights, is really what the opposition is putting forth, is that parents should be responsible for that, the moral upbringing and direction of their kids. That's the language that we're seeing in some bills. So that's where that pushback comes from, that shouldn't come from the schools, that should come from parents.
Yeah. So very interesting. So we've just got about 4 minutes left together. I did see the question about my personal experience in the classroom, and I'd love to share more about that, but I definitely don't want to take up this great time. Thank you so much, Mikayla, for all that you've been sharing. There is a note from Perline, if you wanted to speak up about the planned course outlines that currently exist and teaching that's developmentally appropriate. Our last question.
All right, can you say that one more time?
So Perline says, are there any discussions that focus on planned course outlines that currently exist and teaching that is developmentally appropriate?
So that's a lot of the messaging that we try to put forward, right? Teachers are not trying to put, and there's a lot of like different conversations happening. So we're not trying to put lessons about like highly violent or deeply every lesson that we know teachers try to put forward, and we try to advocate for this and explain this in, I'm sorry. We try to put that forward to them. What I'm concerned about, so some of the concern that I have is that we've seen, so in a hearing, there was a concern about whether or not one of these bills applied to quote unquote supplemental materials. And supplemental materials was defined as anything that is added into the established course curriculum, right? And they said in the hearing that it was not going, or the sponsor of the bill said that supplemental materials does not include lesson plans. But when questioned about this in the hearing, the committee made it clear that lesson plans are expected and included in that definition.
5 minutes, ladies, 5 minutes.
So so there hasn't been concern. So Georgia also has classes that are like Asian American Studies, African American Studies, Gender Studies, and there's a couple, Indigenous Studies. Like we have curriculum for that. It's not taught very widely and it's not taught in any schools, but something that we have been trying to advocate for is protections for those classes, because a lot of these discussions are fundamental to those classes. The pushback that we get from the sponsors and supporters of this bill is that nobody is prevented from teaching about racism. No one is prevented from teaching about discrimination. We just don't want kids to be made to feel personally responsible or guilty for these things. And that is what they are using to justify these bills. That no one is saying you can't teach any curriculum or any lesson material or plan. You just cannot make a child feel bad. But then they're also creating systems for parents to come in and look at all of these materials and interpret whether those materials might make their children feel a certain type of way or not. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yes, Perline, is that clear?
Well, I always find it interesting that people talk about parents being more involved when they've got every opportunity to come in there. Come on. I've been retired for 14 years, and most of the school districts where I've ever worked up and down the East Coast, you always want the parents to come. It is not a secret. The information is not hidden. And it just floors me when they say, well, we want more parent input. I think, who's telling you not to come? Who's telling you not to come? Nobody.
And our feedback has been, if a teacher is saying that to a parent, that is a personnel issue, not a systemic issue.
Mm-hmm.
That is an individual issue. And so now you are creating legislation, and they have even said in these hearings, the sponsor of this bill, one of these sponsors even said 99% of teachers are doing what they need to do and they are doing the right thing. So then the question becomes, why are we not supporting districts who are having these troubles instead of creating legislation that would blanket the state in new procedures? And I will say one last thing about the Parent Bill of Rights. So there are 2 Parent Bill of Rights bills that are moving through. And my problem with these bills, because I 100% and fundamentally believe that parents need to have access and partnership with their teachers. But the language that they are using in these bills is pulled word for word from existing code. So if you are using the exact same language in state code that already exists in other code, you're not creating new access. You are using the exact same systems that already
2 minutes.
exist, and you are excluding all of the folks who have always been excluded. So my concern with this is they're not that I want them to create new legislation per se, but just based on their history of doing it. But if they want to create novel access, they need to create new systems. And that is just not something I think they are interested in.
So just thank you so much, Mikayla. And I'm just so glad we were able to have this conversation, and for us too, to think about ALEC as an organization is very systematic in their spreading of bills that are not doing what we want them to do in our educational system. And so what can counter that in a systemic way moving forward? And how can we think about structurally changing this system as well as our individual action items, because all of those make a difference. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been a pleasure, and I'm going to pass it back on to Cheryl Cork to close us out.
Thank you, Mikayla, so much. Ladies, a round of applause for this young lady. There are several of us on this call who are former teachers, and education is near and dear to our hearts. And we want to always extend the most support that we possibly can to those of you who are still in the trenches. And even though we're not in the trenches, please know that we want to support. I have 2 quick things. One is I'm just going to go through those bills to show you what happened. And last, I'm going to leave you on a high note, because some children, these same ones that everybody thinks are so fragile, fought back on a school district. And I want to show you what happened. It's real short. First of all, I'm going to share, oops, I almost cut myself off there. I'm going to share these bills that Mikayla was talking about. Here are the status of them. The 377, which would promote the use of curricula or training programs to promote and encourage divisive concept. Its additional hearings, are scheduled, pardon me, excuse me, wait one second. 375, Senate Bill 375 to prevent the misuse of curricula or training programs which act upon, encourage, or promote teaching divisive concept is Senate read and referred. It looks like it may pass. HB 888 is pending a second reading. It's talking about teaching race and other individual traits and beliefs in public education. And I want to say that every day of my life as a student, a Black student in class, I felt badly about myself because I was taught that I was from a dark continent where nothing was going on. But I was able to persevere and go on. State HB 1084 passed in the House, is going to the Senate this week for a vote, prohibits divisive concepts of morality, ethnicity, race, etc., that make a student feel guilty and uncomfortable about the subject matter. 226, which Mikayla referred to, banning the sale and distribution of harmful materials to minors, applicable to school librarians, harmful as defined as materials portraying nudity or sexual conduct, or when taken as a whole as lacking in serious literary, scientific, or artistic content. It is scheduled and that one is very problematic. 217 bans obscenity, and 449 gives parents the right to review all instruction materials, have access to the grades, the curriculum, and I'm pretty sure that almost every school in the United States is doing this as we speak. Our last part before we go on is just this one little moment of hope. Just 1 second, you're going to love it. Ooh, just 1 second, I know I can find it. It's right here. I think this is it. Just one moment, just a moment. I want to make sure I have the right thing up. Here it is. Okay. Here it is. Okay.
To protest something that is super important, which is human rights. I am Rosa Parks. Skin like mine. Who is Michelle Obama? Who was Rosa Parks? All these books banned. And I think that is unacceptable, and so do you all today, and that is completely amazing in my opinion. I am overjoyed, and I'm just speaking up from the heart. I don't have anything prepared today, but I just want to say thank you. We will not stop. If tonight's meeting doesn't go the way, we don't reverse the ban, we will not stop. I promise we won't stop. We'll be out there every Monday and every Friday protesting in the morning. We'll be doing this today. We will not stop. This is not for me. I'm a senior, like Todd said, I'm a senior. I don't have to technically be out here, but I'm here for the girls who are 5, 6, 7 elementary kids. They don't have a voice yet. They don't know what's right from wrong. But when we see wrong, we do something about it. And that is why we are out here today. And I'm so happy and so grateful and so blessed to have people out here, like-minded people who can see a difference and make a change about it.
And the end result of that was, whoops, excuse me, wait. The end result of that was that the board unfroze the ban on books, because those students that we saw in the CNN clip in the beginning came out in full force. They rallied, they challenged the board members. Have you ever read the book? They made them tell what was objectionable. to the point that the board actually had to back down. So we see as we close this educational forum about what's going on in our schools, that indeed our children are the way of the future. And we see some brave leaders stepping up. And we know that they're definitely going to come from Ogechi's class and from Mikayla's tutelage and all the rest of us who are staunch supporters of education. I want to thank you once again, Mikayla, for your time, for the energy, for the things that you do for our children here in Georgia. And I would like to thank all of you for coming in and hearing this. Stella said to tell you to call your superintendents. I didn't put the numbers down because everybody on this call is capable of looking up a number and finding it and calling.
Ms. Cork, we're at time.
Yes, we also want you to organize your kitchen cabinet. That means talk to the people that are in your sphere and get them activated around the things that they're complaining about. Do something about it. Whine, but then go out and do something. Organize your church and get them activated, help people, and we've got to do some critical thinking seminars. So I thank you for today, and I turn this back over to our President Pro Tem, Ms. Sarah Cookson. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mikayla. Please visit us often, update us, bring us new information as you can. I would like to say a few words. Cheryl Cork, happy birthday today. And to Heidi Danis, happy birthday earlier this week. Everybody eat lots of cake this week in honor of those birthdays. There's no calories involved in birthday cakes. We all know that. I have a few other notes finally, just to remind you, these are reminders. If you can help out with voter registration, wherever you are in any way, please, please, please get a hold of Connie, get a hold of Doris, and sign up for these voter registration events. We need to get those voters registered, and we need to get those voters out. So let's get that done. If you could help out with our $20.22 fundraiser in 2022, if possible, please do. Mark your calendars, make a note, sip and say on March 25th. This is a lot of fun besides being just absolutely inspirational time for women. It's at 6:30 p.m. Put it on your calendar. June 24th, the GFDW event, watch for it. More information will be coming your way. And renew your memberships and bring your friends to Sip and Say, bring your friends to the Women on the Courthouse Lawn in April, bring your friends to our meetings. We need a lot of help to get this county, to get this state turned blue, and we're going to work hard to get that done. Were there any other notes? Did anybody else have anything in announcements that they wanted to mention?
Madam President, we're looking for a venue. We're looking for a venue that holds at least 100 people to have our candidates forum. If anybody's church or you have access to someone who wants to do a civic good deed and donate that space to us, we would be most appreciative. Thank you.
Very important. Thanks for reminding me of that, Cheryl. Did
You're looking
anybody
for
else
indoor space? I just want to know, are you looking for indoor space? Okay.
Would outdoor space work if this is in April, right?
Yes, this is for our candidates forum, and we are considering at this moment having a joint one with Clayton County. And so we're looking for a venue, and it may indeed be in Clayton, but we're looking for one here in Fayette, of course. Thank you.
Wonderful. I assume you've been in touch with Amaris coming about a space. She's the FDW equivalent in Clayton County. But we'll get in touch with that so we can come up with something as soon as possible. And did anybody else have any notes or any announcements they care to share at this time? None? Okay then. Madam Secretary, I believe we are adjourned of our meeting. Thank you for coming, everyone. I truly appreciate it. If you want to hang out for 5 minutes and just chat with somebody, please feel free to. We will be here for another 5 minutes. Thank you all for coming. I know it's down here in Edisto Beach Islands. It's a really nice day. So I appreciate everybody taking the time out of your Saturdays to join us. And I look forward to seeing each of you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah, for doing this from your vacation spot, wherever you are.
Oh, it's gorgeous down here.
And thank you to Ogechi. Ogechi, bless her heart. She just, that's my girl. I know she's your child, but that's my girl.
I'll tell her.
And I was going to point out too that Mikayla has posted in our chat. If anyone wants to take a quick look at it, there's a link to where they have their meetings every Monday at 6 p.m. We can listen in on some of the Education Coalition meetings about censorship in our schools. So you might want to check that out.
And I just want to take a moment, Sarah, to say thank you to everyone who has done a remarkable job of keeping time and keeping us on point as far as our time for our meeting today. So thank you so much. You made my job so easy. Sorry, Sarah, back to you.
Okay, anybody else have anything that they want to share with us today? Delma, thank you for coming. And Herzog, not to see your pretty face, but I know you're here as an angel on my shoulder, so thank you. Gail Goodwin, I look forward to seeing you in person again with your pom-poms. And thanks, Chandra and Valerie Smith. Heidi, we love you. Just take it slow, just be patient. I know that's hard, but I'm just so happy. And I see Audrey was here today too. Thanks for coming, Audrey. We appreciate that. And my own personal calendar girl, Ann Sutton.
You can go ahead and drink the beer now.
We could probably shut the recording off too.
Oh, we probably should. Before we say something. Oh, we got the wrong mouse. Hang on.